The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing. I am your host, Dave. Greg is not here with me because we are going to be doing a classic re-release. So we really appreciate everyone's patience as we've taken a little bit of a break, giving ourselves a little time to recharge and also just kind of get reinvigorated with all the upcoming new and exciting episodes that we are looking forward to bringing to everybody. But we wanted to do something for some of the listeners who haven't had a chance to go through all of our back episodes and give them an opportunity to hear some of our favorites from when we first started. So this is a throwback to July 22nd of 2022 when we released the Guide to the 7 Deadly Sins. This is an episode that we enjoyed quite a bit, and it really did shape one of our most popular episodes, which was the Guide to Dark Psychology. So everyone, please enjoy, but don't worry, we'll be back soon enough with new episodes. But in the meantime, enjoy this little bit of guilty pleasure with the 7 Deadly Sins, and let us know which of these sins you are most commonly guilty of. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome to the Modern Therapist's Guide to Nothing, where in each episode we take a topic, theme, or thing, overanalyze it, make it all make sense in the scheme of life, living, and mental health. My name is Dave. I am joined here with my co-host, Greg, aka Gregory. Is your real name an AKA? I don't think so, actually.
Well, Dave, we've got a doozy today. Just kind of a fun one, I think. I know I've got
so that's not, I think I could think of a lot of words to describe this one. Fun was not the word I was thinking of, but
are you kidding me? Dude, 7 Deadly Sins are so much fun. They're all so fun. Right? I mean, if you really think about it, it's just
engaging in them.
Yeah.
All right.
But no, we're going to be talking about the pros and the cons, and that's why we have got our monk robes on. We're just about to get into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you think when you think of 7 Deadly Sins, you think monks. What else do you think?
Mm-hmm. I think of demons, monks. Weird monk haircuts, hay, like carts with hay in it. I'm thinking
carts with hay.
Yeah. I'm thinking like the medieval times.
Oh, is that like Valentine's that they used to give, hearts with hay?
No, carts, like hay carts.
They said hearts. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So at no point in this entire time did you think of the movie 7 with Brad Pitt and what's in the box? You didn't think of any of that?
No, I did. I very dark, very sinister. I didn't think to talk about any.
That's all I could think of as we were thinking, as we were throwing down thoughts. That's all I could think about was that. And we can get into that later of kind of what the premise of that film was as far as from the killer's perspective. But let's start it off with, explaining why they were created and where they came from.
Okay. Well, I think that, it's just my thought of why they were created is because at the time, there needed to be some control measures. And we know that people in power are always looking to control the populace, right? So, when you're in power and it's like the 1400s, I mean, when these things started getting really popular, like this was a time where Dante was sort of like a popular figure. And they wanted to find a way to control people. And so they thought back to like the ethics of antiquity, right? What were the ethics that kind of made people rulable, very easily rulable? Sure. And now how do you get this idea to the people? And the easiest way is to, exploit their religious beliefs and have all the things that they're doing that's getting in the way of a society being controllable.
Yeah. And
make them almost, so sinful and so bad that you're going to burn in hell for every single one that you do.
Right.
And also, there's a part of it like control. When I say control, I don't think that necessarily it's it's a bad thing all the time. Like you do need to be in some kind of social contract, and it's good for everyone in a way. And someone needs to be in charge.
I was just, as you were describing this, I'm like, yeah, the idea of trying to, control a population it sounds manipulative, like we talked about in our dark psychology episode. And as David Machiavelli, I'm here to say, I do think that also it can, it's like setting general guidelines though for how individuals can coexist successfully. So I mean, there's definitely a negative connotation we could put on it, but it looks like there could also be like a positive connotation if we think about it as what was going on in that time where they felt like these rules, these virtues needed to be laid down in order for people to be able to coexist better.
I guess people were just they're being driven from their work, being just sort of engaging in activities that were more self-serving than anything else, and that was not only was that a problem for society, but it was a problem for people in general, I suppose.
Sure.
And I think that the 7 deadly sins are interesting because they're listed in order of severity. Well, we're going to list them at least in order of severity, and they're based on like different types of things. So like there's some of these sins are like sins of the appetite, which aren't as severe, and sins of the appetite just meaning like our basic needs, like gluttony and lust would be sins of the appetite because it's like
right.
We kind of like.
I think another way that they phrase that is it's almost like our animalistic instincts. Isn't that kind of how they look at it? Speaking of like lust, knowing that that's a part of like our primitive sides, but it's also not allowing that to just be completely unleashed, right?
Yeah. So Anna, that's a good point, because I read that Dante actually broke it up into 3 groups, which doesn't really make sense because there's 7, but still, he used animals to break it down to make it have it make sense. Like wolf, it would be the sins of appetite, sins of just feeding into those like lower desires and letting those desires get ahead of our own intellect. And then there would be sins of the lion, which would be violence against people. And then the worst kinds of sins would be the sins of the leopard, because the leopard is fraudulent. Something about this leopard doesn't change his spots kind of thing. Yeah. But those sins where you're like tricking people and using your intellect to knowing that you're doing something bad. You're not just giving into something. You're doing something like rotten to hurt someone else.
Sure. So the difference being one thing is like a primitive side of us that we all embody versus utilizing our skills and our I think you mentioned this at some point, intelligence for evil purposes.
Right. And it really is like, the most interesting description I've seen of these is through the Inferno. Like I leaned on Dante a lot for this stuff, but I thought what was really interesting and what kind of hit the nail on the head for us, when you think of like us coming from the angle of it's definitely a tool for the lords or whoever, the people in power at the time, is when you think of the lowest point in hell, just hanging out with the devil, there's Cassius, Brutus, and Judas. And Cassius and Brutus are from the same exact period, guilty of the same exact crime, and that was disobeying Caesar, which is they went against their own boss, their lord, which is sending that message to the masses. That's the worst sin you could possibly commit, right? Going against the people who are in charge.
Sure.
And then, Brutus going against like the actual Lord is like, I mean, Judas, that's his ultimate sin. But for it to have those two in the same position as the guy who betrayed Jesus is like saying like, holy shit, like it's this important to listen to like the whoever at the time, the earl or the king or whoever's in the property owner, whoever it was.
Right. Which shows you just how calculated this was, as far as we were talking about how it was created and like the intention. Definitely they prioritized keeping their own hierarchy protected above all. The other things Absolutely. I do think are like basic things that we kind of need as a society to recognize, because if not, it does cause chaos. It does
Oh,
cause a lot of
1,000%. Like,
issues. Yeah.
so it it's good for the people, the powers, for chaos not to ensue. That's definitely good, but it's good for the people too.
Sure.
So
sure.
that's why we form governments, and that's why we have governments, and it is a form to kind of like control.
Let's take a look at some of these and kind of talk about that, though, because I think that's interesting.
We can go through them one by one.
One by freaking.
Oh man! All right, so we'll go in order of severity. So the least severe to the most severe, and of course the least severe is going to be those animal instinct ones, and we'll start with lust.
Yeah.
Which is it's essentially just like an over appetite, and it's taking our lowest traits and indulging in them despite our rationale.
Hey, I was just going to say, Greg, these are interesting because you do have to look into what they mean, because if you just take it for a surface level, like, so the understanding that I have is that, like, again, lust is something that we all, it's an animal instinct. It's primitive. It's something inside all of us, but it's that overindulgence in lust that they're saying is a deadly sin. So they're not saying that lust in general is a deadly sin. It's the overindulgence in it.
No, yeah, and it's not, it's not thinking about how it would affect the other person too. So if you're lusting after someone's wife and you're just, all you care about is like, you want to fulfill this need that you have, and you're not worried about how it's going to affect their life, then that would be lust. But if it's just a couple of people, you just both, a couple of young people, and you just both got that lust, man. I mean, that's kind of a beautiful thing, right? I mean, there's got to be some room for that, and that's fine. And if it's like you have these feelings for someone, and they have those feelings for you, and you just get into it, and there's no one's gonna be hurt by it, that's fine. But lust happens when those primal urges sort of outweigh the rationale of that of however the situation is going to end.
Yep.
So I mean, that's lust. I mean,
so the next one is one that I think closely connects to this, and that's gluttony, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because we're talking about that overindulgence, and it's so funny. If I were to say gluttony to you, do you have a connotation with a certain thing?
Yeah. Overeating. I can
instantly. Food is what I like, and I feel like that term gluttony is commonly referred to in the realm of food, but I don't think it necessarily meant gluttony towards food in this, when the 7 deadly sins were developed. I think it's gluttony within anything. It's kind of overindulgence in anything.
Yeah, and I think it's almost this element too of, if you're taking so much, and maybe this doesn't like apply so much in modern times, but if you're taking so much that it could be like if you're eating so much food that it's going to take food out of someone else's mouth.
Yes,
that's where I think the logic for this problem began.
Correct.
That's why this is a sin.
Also includes alcohol use.
Oh yeah, get that gluttonous for alcohol. I mean, we've all.
So in a way, this is kind of their way of looking at probably very early stages of substance abuse, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like they've noticed, well, medieval Larry hasn't been to work in 3 days, and that's because he's been drinking, the ale every night, and that's going to be a problem. So now let's make that, go ahead and have that ale, but have fun burning in the third circle of hell or wherever that lands you,
Yeah, medieval Larry.
Hey, listen, there's no script for this, so it's tough. All right, so the next one is greed. And I guess, it's just more than you need. It's trading. So here's the thing with greed, right? It's trading, and this is the religious component, trading the eternal salvation for the temporal. Like, I want things now. And that's sort of like a problem with it. And I think when greed becomes a problem is, and this is for you, David Machiavelli, maybe you can translate this better for me. It's when wealth becomes the end and not the mean. Do you know how you were saying, like, when do the means define the end? So if wealth is the thing that you're the end, that's what you've been hoping for, you just want to be wealthy, that's when it's greed. When you use wealth to help other people and to do things and to build things, then it's not greed. If you're driving to get money because you want to do things with it, you want to help people with it, you want to take care of people with it, that's fine. If you're searching for money just for the sake of money, it's greed.
Yeah. So are these three all the sins of the wolf? All three of these?
I think that yes, and I even think maybe the next one's sort of confusing.
Sure.
But and then I know.
I
Go ahead. Yeah.
I wanted to just say, because all three of those are very interesting in the way that they limit behavior.
Mhm.
It's all based on this setting limits for yourself, not overstepping your boundaries, not overindulging, not trying to gain too much, which is interesting. I mean, I think that's actually not a bad thing for anybody. I think we all need to have some limits in life. But if you're thinking about control and we're thinking about how this is coming from the top down, this is also a way of keeping people in their place. Because if you're not, motivated to get wealth, or if you're saying like getting wealth would be a sin, so that kind of deters you from doing it, or like, gluttony and all that stuff. This is ways of not allowing people to leave their class.
Right. 1,000%. That's the whole idea. Yeah. And that whole idea, like not only making it sinful to be the other way, but it's, the meek shall inherit the earth. You get a reward if you live this way. If you try to just keep the least amount possible. The next one's a little interesting. That's when we're starting to get into these interesting ones. And now that you mentioned 7, I remember sloth being the scariest of the 7. Well, lust was pretty rough.
Gluttony was rough too.
Sloth was scariest. People need to see that movie. That's intense.
Yeah.
So sloth is just, when good people fail to act, not caring. I think of it now as like sloth would be the equivalent of, not voting, not getting involved, not trying to make things better. That's how I think of it as in modern times.
Yeah.
But it's just really like, I don't care, whatever.
Yeah, we commonly think of sloth as lazy in modern day. It's that person that has no desire to do anything for themselves, allows other people to do it for them, maybe lives off others. I don't know. It's like, it's hard to say when they have the means and the ability to do more, I think is the important factor. So not trying to say that like everybody needs to do a certain thing or be self-sufficient. If you have that ability and that means and you don't utilize it, I think that's what they're kind of identifying.
Right. It's like if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing at all, or you'll fall for anything. I'm messing that all up. But it's your Eeyores and your Snuffleupagus.
Sure.
These type of characters where you just don't care about anything. Like nothing kind of drives you. And I just trying to figure out like why would the people in power care about that?
So here's what I think. I actually do wonder if they're thinking manual labor wise and how manual labor benefits society back in a day where there probably was like manual labor that was building their society and very, very important stuff that they needed certain class level people to do that they weren't
like, I don't give a shit if your windmill gets built or not. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah. So if you were trying to escape work all the time, if you were engaging in like heavy drinking and gluttony, you wouldn't be doing your daily tasks that keep
society or even Dave, like, well, if it's never going to be mine, I'm never going to make enough money. Like, what's the point, right? The point is you'll go to hell if you feel that way. So cut it out.
Yeah. Those, oh God, this is all, it's all coming together now that you just said that. I can almost picture it. Like if they're basically instilling fear in that person that's going to give up hope and say, well, nothing I do is ever going to change my own status. I'm never going to advance. It's always going to be this way. So what's the point? Well, guess what? The point is you're going to go to hell, dude.
Yeah.
So get off your butt, medieval Larry.
Yeah, exactly. I've had enough of you. So this next one, wrath. I mean, this is pretty much self-explanatory. We're stepping into lion territory right now because this is
so violence, right? Violence on others.
Yeah, and that's obviously a problem for the people in power. I mean, you don't want everyone killing each other, and you can't be living in fear if things are going to be getting done. And I think anger is fine. Anger, generally speaking, is fine.
Yeah.
This is like unreasonable anger, and even revenge.
I was just going to say, would revenge fall into this, you think? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Revenge is for sure in this. That's a big no-no, they say. Because they say, don't worry about revenge. God's going to take care of that when everyone dies.
Sure.
you know. So that's the problem. So like revenge is going to be a problem for people in power because that's going to slow down production.
Yeah.
So let's just like God handle that when everyone dies.
I really like this next one. Just gonna say.
You do? You get? So do you want to take it?
Yeah. So envy. I like it because I think it's an interesting one because it's not just being jealous. It's being envious involves. I don't like the fact that this person has this, so I hate them for that, and I want that, and I should have that, and I'm going to try to take that from them. Right?
Yeah, that's messed up. There's a word for that now. Haters gonna hate.
That's a phrase, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a phrase for that now too.
Whoa!
But you're right. No, it's not just. So it's not just being envious of medieval Larry's wife. It's being like, not only should I have her, he shouldn't have her. He doesn't deserve her. Why? Why doesn't he? So it's that, just not being happy for someone else's accomplishments, right? Being jealous of what they have, and not being happy, not gratitude for what you have.
If you think about it, it's like this one almost could go into those first few behaviors, because I do feel like it's almost like a primitive instinct to have envy. If you think about children, they're like, as soon as they can speak, they're like, I want that kid. They get jealous of each other when one has a toy that the other one doesn't, or it's something that we hopefully somewhat grow out of, or like at least minimizes as we get older, but it's in us all. So it almost feels like one of those animal instincts, but then it gets lumped into this this later one because the repercussions could be violence.
And so the repercussions with envy could definitely be violence too now. So, because think about it, because you're essentially, if you're envious, you're trying to lower someone else's reputation. And it's making me think of Salem. Like once this stuff starts going around, all these things they're telling tales about each other, and what you're essentially trying to do is lower someone's reputation. And when you lower someone's reputation, you put them in a position to be hurt by violence.
You mean accusations that later were being done just because they wanted to take someone down because they were envious?
Exactly. You're envious of their stuff, so you make up stuff.
Another reason why envious is interesting to me, I think it also goes into, so we were talking about the sins of the wolf, lion, and leopard. I think it covers all three. So I do think there's some primitive to it. I think it's the lion because of the violence. It also could fall into leopard because typically when you're envious and you make action to try to get your status on the same level, you're doing something that's sort of what was the word for the leopard that they use? You're fraudulent. You're doing something fraudulent to either bring them down or raise yourself up to their status, or to, you know what I mean? It almost encompasses all three.
Yeah, and it's worse than it raises to a higher level of other sins because you're using your intellect, this thing that could be used, for good, and you're using it you're not just succumbing to your base impulses like gluttony, or you're not just trying to like fulfill these needs and you're having a moment of weakness. You're genuinely trying to hurt someone to put yourself in a better position with complete disregard of what it does to them.
Yeah.
And that's and then this sort of leads us into the last sin, which I think, you're bringing up an interesting point with envy, but I think pride, the worst sin, kind of does exactly what you're talking about. And it not only is it a terrible sin for a lot of reasons that we'll get into, but I think it's underlying all the other sins. Like if you think about lust, right? And you're not worried about, how this, you're going to take this, what you need, you're going to, have sex with this person and their life could be ruined by it. But where pride fits into that is you're putting your importance over their importance. And that might be what makes pride the worst sin. Putting yourself over others. So it's not just this thing that like, oh, I have pride in like my job, I have pride in my work. No, it's this idea that you sort of have a distorted view of yourself. You're more important than others. And I think that's the problem.
Narcissistic personality disorder?
Yeah. They knew that right away. That was like a sin.
Right. All right. So back to like kind of this overarching theme that we've been talking about with why these might have been identified as important for the intention of molding behavior. Why would pride be important?
Because if you have too much pride, you can rise to the level of prominence, and that's no one wants that, right? They don't want you following those dreams. And the other thing about, when I think about pride now, Dave, like I'm thinking about people, how pride is dangerous today. When I look at Instagram and I see people's what they post, and they're not posting the full picture of who they are, like all the ups and downs and like their tough days. They're posting the highlight reel of their life. Yeah. And so when other people see that and their life doesn't add up to that, they're getting that same distorted view of who that person is. And they feel that this person's better than them. And you see what the problems with that are.
Yeah, it's called FOMO, and it's horrible.
Yeah, it's FOMO. It's like, why am I not on a beach looking perfect?
I'm afraid I'm missing out. I had to say that in case anyone doesn't know what FOMO is. I don't know the age range of our listeners.
I just learned not too long ago what FOMO was. So I don't know what that tells you. Anything else on pride? It is the worst sin of all.
I think it's an interesting, it's interesting how pride has a different connotation today than it may have had then. Because now it's like, you want kids to have pride, you want people to have pride in themselves. But I understand the difference in how they're using it, but it's like, it's the most deadly of the sins in here. Right. And now it has like, almost a good connotation to the word being proud or having pride.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes, it does. It's just, we do have to have some humility. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
When you think about we touched on it early on, and you're in the depths of hell, which is actually cold, contrary to popular belief. So, it's the cold, it's frozen. And the people there are, the two people who betrayed Julius Caesar and the person that betrayed Jesus. And their sin of pride is that they put themselves over someone else. And that's betrayal. Really, it's betrayal to the human race, I guess. That's the way they're saying it. That's the way they're spinning it. But you're right. I think pride was another, like, it's the most important of all, is because you could never be in charge. You could never do what we do. So you be down there and we'll be up here.
So some interesting virtues that can overcome these, and you mentioned one of them already. So there's 7 that that can overcome these 7 deadly sins. So we have humility, charity, chastity, gratitude, temperance, patience, and diligence.
See, now those sound boring.
Yes. But what better qualities to instill in your society if you want to keep the peace, if you want people to stay in their lane, and you want to rule for as long as possible?
And again, like, we're saying those things like it's a bad thing. This is the things that you should be doing instead. But there is value in all these things too. There really is. It started off with just the 4 cardinal virtues, and that was like a Plato thing. And that was, prudence, which, essentially means, appropriate course of action, and justice is fairness. Fortitude, which is, courage, confronting fear and uncertainty. And maybe the most important of all is temperance. And that's just sort of restraint. And we need some of that in life too, right? Like, not taking everything we think we deserve, and having some restraint, and so that others can share in it. So I think the virtues have some merit. I do. I think they're not the worst ways that you can. I think if you add a little bit of all of them into your life, then I think that's enriching. Maybe we can bring up something else too, Dave. Did you know that at one point there was an 8th deadly sin?
When was this?
Well, maybe the 4th century, pre-Dante. But they ended up merging it with sloth. But the name of it was acedia. And it sort of meant without care, hopelessness, listlessness. And it was considered the worst possible sin.
Oh, that was the worst?
Yeah. And you want to know what it sounds a lot of? I mean, if you read it, it reads like the DSM for symptoms of depression.
Yeah. That is interesting.
Which is crazy. Yeah, like that was the worst sin that you could commit, was the sin of depression. Probably because it, you stayed in bed and you didn't do much.
I know who wrote that one.
You do?
Yeah.
Who's that?
Moses.
Oh God. Man, he had his hand in everything.
He did. Every episode he's done something, so it's crazy. Don't fact check me.
Moses, what a guy.
It's
So, I mean,
interesting because everything about that we kind of did discuss with like sloth and gluttony. So maybe at some point they kind of felt like, hey, are we double dipping here? Did we already cover this? 7 is a way better number than 8, though.
It really is, and it is like 8 deadly sins. You'd be like, oh yeah, all right.
Oh, that's glorious of us. You know?
A little greedy.
Yeah.
Being a greedy Gregory. You know what's funny is like when I was reading Greed, I think that like I don't know if this is important, but I've been greedy in my life, and I think it's the way I grew up is I didn't have much, so like now I buy like more clothes than I need, more stuff than I need, so that if I ever fell on hard times, it's there, you know. So I can be a gluttonous Gregory, I can be a greedy Gregory. I can partake in some of this too, and I think some of it is just defense mechanism.
I'm glad that we can have a conversation about these for the sake of, through this research and through this conversation, it is identifying that these are in all of us, and ultimately, if you try to take this and live by these in some form of like modern day, like this isn't the worst thing to like have as a structured, like these are things I should watch out for. Understanding that we all have traits that might not be the most flattering, but just as long as we do it within some sort of like, we have boundaries for ourselves, we have limits for ourselves. Overindulgence, I think, is a problem, and a lot of this is about not overindulging. And you're exactly right. I mean, I can freaking eat, man. And like I think about that, like sometimes I'm like, I just ate a ton, and there's people who don't eat, and here I am.
You're taking it out of someone's mouth.
Yeah.
To sin. So here's the thing. You're bringing up a great point. The reason why these things exist is because they are almost natural in all of us. They're almost intrinsic in being human, all these sins. But the problem is, although they exist in all of us, society can't exist if we act out on all of these.
Yes.
You can't just do whatever you want all the time and expect to have society happen. It just can't be. You can't act out any of your lusts, your gluttony, or your greed all the time. Or people who are have less strength, won't be able to exist in society. And whatever the strength they're bringing, it might be intellectual strength, it helps us all grow. So if we're able to coexist and recognize each other's strengths and have some temperance with our appetite for these things, then that's how society exists. And that's why the virtues really are virtues, because we are working against our own nature in order to make society a better place for everyone.
Yes. Bingo.
Yeah. Man, I got those monk robes just making me feel like putting this down on a scroll.
So I think that was a pretty extensive deep dive into these 7 deadly sins. So.
The only thing I wish we had done though, Dave, is like, when you do like commit lust or gluttony or greed, like what happens to you in hell? Because there's answers for that.
Oh boy.
But we just didn't really dig in. So if people are interested, they can dig in on that, Dante's Inferno. And Dave, before we wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to say in the pop culture realm? Because I know that you.
Oh yeah, no, I think we kind of covered it, but it's interesting because we think about. So we were bringing up 7, and we think about people who get really wrapped up into these things, and that's kind of like the premise is there's a killer that targets each person. It's basically like thinking of a vigilante, right? We see that almost in like. The newest Batman with the Riddler. He was kind of like this kind of vigilante. He had this set of values, and he was picking like groups of people to target based on what those values are. And in 7, they do that. The killer does that within the 7 deadly sins. So he finds somebody who's engaged in lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, all of them, and each one is like this visual of like what happens to you when you engage in it, right? So essentially, yeah, pop culture, I think it's also highlighting how we can sometimes look at these too black and white. It's like that killer looked at them instead of identifying. We all kind of engage in these, and it's like that black and white. Like you committed lust, you committed gluttony. And I think
got you on that.
What's that?
He could have got you on the gluttony, right?
I know, man. I'm lucky. I could have been on my. I don't even want to describe that scene. That scene will stick with me forever. But yeah, I think it's important. I think we've been highlighting that throughout this whole conversation. It's just these are things that are almost intrinsic, and it's all about just setting limitations for yourself. But ultimately, we don't have to go and attack each other about these things either.
Yeah. And maybe it's smart that we do feel a little bit of guilt when we engage in them.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yep.
So I think that's all I got on the 7 deadly sins.
Okay. All right. Well, that wraps us up for today. So again, as always, contact us if you guys have any topic recommendations, or find us on Instagram. Modern Therapist Guide to Nothing @gmail.com is the email. That's therapist with an S. And the same, that's also our Instagram handle, minus the @gmail. So you can find us on there, and we look forward to bringing you guys another topic next week. Thanks. Have a great night.
Dave.